Listen carefully, Elon Musk and Tesla holders. I just banned cobalt exports from Burkina Faso to US. Brothers and sisters of our continent, and to the watchers of the world, hear me clearly. Today I place a simple demand at the feet of the corporations and governments that built fortunes on our soil. For decades your industries have relied on minerals dug from our earth, by our people, under our skies. Yet the profits and the privileges have been shipped overseas. That era of quiet extraction ends now. I speak not as a supplicant, nor as a negotiator. I speak as a leader who will no longer permit our resources to feed other nations while our children remain hungry at home. Today, our lands and our mines will be controlled by the people whose labor built them. And yes, when supply chains that depend on our minerals shudder, markets will react. That is the consequence of centuries of unfair trade. That is the consequence of taking without fair return. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to the facts behind the indignation. For generations, multinational extraction has followed the same script. Our Earth's treasures are extracted cheaply, shipped abroad, processed there, and then sold back to us as products at a premium. The narrative of development was often a one-way street. We supply the raw material. You reap the highest value, profits, patents, processing plants. These were not built on our terms. Workers in mines earned a pittance. Communities near extraction sites paid the price in damaged land, polluted water, and weakened local economies. But minerals are not merely commodities on a spreadsheet. They are the foundation of modern technology, the batteries that power electric vehicles, the capacitors and chips inside our phones, the metals in renewable energy systems. When entire industries structure themselves around access to a particular mineral, the country that controls that mineral wields leverage. We were taught to believe that leverage belonged to those who had capital and technology. Today, I declare the opposite. If a resource lies under our ground, its first duty is to our people. This is not revenge. It is correction. It is the insistence that raw materials should translate into factories on our soil, into higher wages for our workers, into training and technology transfer, and into stabilized revenues that fund hospitals, schools, and infrastructure. Fair trade, not extraction disguised as progress, is the objective. How do we convert this principle into policy? The answer is practical, decisive, and enforceable. First, physical control of strategic supply nodes. Where critical minerals are being extracted and processed, there must be sovereign oversight, secure facilities, transparent operations, and public accounting. This does not mean lawlessness or chaos. It means placing mining operations under national authority and ensuring that security arrangements protect the public interest, not private extraction privileges. Second, immediate export controls on unprocessed strategic minerals. Refined and value-added products carry far greater value than raw shipments. Export permits will require minimum domestic processing standards. Companies that wish to buy our minerals must either build processing capacity here, enter joint ventures with majority local ownership, or demonstrate long-term, binding commitments to the communities where the minerals are extracted. Third, new pricing frameworks. No longer will our minerals be priced solely on foreign commodity exchanges that do not reflect the social and environmental cost of extraction in our countries. Price floors, stabilization mechanisms, and contracts indexed to fair market benchmarks set by regional cooperation will ensure predictable and humane compensation for the people whose labor produced the value. Fourth, technology transfer and workforce development. If a company wishes to operate within our borders, the contract must require training programs, the hiring of local engineers and specialists, and progressive ownership of facilities by local entities. We must seize the moment to build expertise, so that future generations are not permanently relegated to extraction tasks while value accrues elsewhere. Fifth, environmental and social safeguards. Our lands, rivers, and communities cannot be collateral damage. Mining agreements must include binding remediation, clean water guarantees, and strict safety protocols. This is non-negotiable. These measures are enforceable through a combination of national legislation, regional coordination, and transparent public oversight. They are pragmatic steps that convert control into sustainable development. We must be candid about the immediate consequences and how we shall manage them. Yes, markets will react. When supply tightens, prices spike and share values wobble. Corporations built on cheap materials will feel the strain. Analysts will run worst-case scenarios. Media outlets will produce breathless headlines. That is not new. The past century offered many lessons about how the global economy responds to sudden shifts. The important thing is to remember, we are not acting to harm the planet or to sabotage global progress. Rather, we act to end a hypocritical arrangement in which some reap the environmental benefits of green technologies while communities at the source bear the social and ecological costs. If global industries need raw materials, let them pay for legitimate value and invest in the places that produce those minerals. Let us also address the claim that alternatives exist at scale. Some will argue that other countries or new mines can replace the supply. The truth is messy. There are deposits in other regions, and research into substitute materials continues. But transitions take time, investment, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, millions of jobs, entire factories, and energy strategies are already built on the current supply. That imbalance creates leverage we can and should use responsibly. And if the reaction is coercion, diplomatic pressure, sanctions, or the threat of economic consequences, we must be prepared. Sovereignty is not defenseless. There are legal avenues, international forums, and regional alliances that bolster our position. We can diversify trading partners, pursue cooperative agreements with nations prepared to treat us fairly, and coordinate regionally to prevent isolated retribution. Finally, let us talk about the calculus. When a corporation loses short-term value because it must pay a fair price for raw materials, that corporation can still be profitable if it retools its supply chain ethically. The real failure was the pretense that exploitation was the only economic path. We are proposing a different model, a longer-term partnership that shares benefits and responsibilities. Imagine a mining region where raw ore is refined on site, where children who would have been sent into dangerous pits attend schools, funded by royalties, where a national refinery has trained local chemists and engineers, where a new factory makes battery components, employing skilled technicians who earn a living wage. Imagine the tax revenue used to modernize hospitals, expand safe drinking water access, and build reliable transportation networks. This is not fantasy. It is development writ with a different priority. When minerals are processed inside the producing country, far more value is retained. Local content rules stimulate domestic industries that create jobs with higher pay and longer lifespans than intermittent extraction gigs. When technical expertise is built locally, the knowledge economy grows, enabling further downstream manufacturing and innovation. This, in turn, stabilizes currencies, improves budget planning, and creates resilience. Consider also the moral dimension. When a nation receives fair compensation and invests it in sustainable community development, the social narrative changes. Extractive economies that once bred resentment and dependence transform into engines of national renewal. Where exploitation created cycles of poverty, equitable returns fund social mobility. An additional effect, when a cluster of countries coordinates through regional value chains, bargaining power increases. Joint infrastructure projects, such as integrated rail, regional processing hubs, and shared power systems, dramatically reduce costs and increase efficiency. This cooperation is not simply economic, it is strategic. It changes the relationship between producing nations and large multinational buyers from a hierarchical dynamic into a negotiated partnership of equals. To fellow leaders of resource-rich nations, this is an invitation and a challenge. Let us coordinate our rules and timelines so that no single nation bears the full brunt of initial disruption while others continue business as usual. Use the platforms we have: regional economic communities, continental summits, joint negotiation councils, to standardize minimum terms. Encourage joint investment banks that can finance the capital needed for local processing. Share technical resources and training programs to citizens and communities in mining regions. Insist on transparency and accountability. Royalty flows, contract terms, and environmental mitigations must be publicly audited. Your voice matters. Demand local representation in oversight boards. Insist on community benefit agreements. And refuse deals negotiated behind closed doors. To investors and responsible companies, if you want long-term access to our minerals, adapt to the new terms. Invest in processing facilities here. Co-create training programs. Accept fair pricing that recognizes environmental and social costs. Those companies that shift to partnership rather than exploitation will find stable, reliable relationships and long-term profitability. If you are a policymaker or negotiator preparing to engage with foreign corporations, here are practical proposals to use as baseline terms. Data processing requirement. No export of raw ore without proof of adequate domestic refining capacity. Grace periods for phased compliance tied to verified capital commitments. Shah local ownership. Majority African ownership or progressive local stake increases for new concessions. Technology transfer. Legally binding training and licensing clauses with milestone audits, fair pricing. Contracts that use transparent benchmarks and price floors. Stabilization mechanisms to protect both producer and buyer from wild swings. Community Development Fund. A fixed percentage of revenue dedicated to local education, healthcare, and environmental restoration. With independent oversight. Environmental safeguards. Strong enforcement of remediation, water protection, and worker safety. Non-compliance penalties severe enough to deter corner cutting. Payment options. Accept multiple currencies and consider alternative payments such as sovereign bonds backed by resource, revenues, or even commodity-backed instruments that reduce volatility. Prepare contingency plans. Stockpile strategic reserves for essential domestic needs. Diversify buyers. And develop domestic manufacturing prioritized for critical national projects. I know some will call this radical. Some will say it threatens global industry. To them I say, it corrects an old inequality. It aligns resources and responsibility. It asks for fairness, not for dominance. We do not seek to punish consumers of technology. We seek to ensure that those who profit most from our minerals also invest in the societies that provide them. If a corporation chooses partnership over predation, welcome them. If a nation chooses cooperation over coercion, we will welcome them. But make no mistake, our patience has been exhausted. From this day forward, our policies will prioritize people over pointed profits. We will protect our land, our workers, and our future. We will demand prices and terms that build schools instead of single-use wealth extracted and exported to foreign shareholder reports. We will establish regional platforms to coordinate action so that leverage is a collective asset, not the burden of a single country. And to the citizens who made our independence and our dignity possible, your children will inherit something better, not just the minerals beneath our feet, but the industries, the jobs, and the institutions that turn those minerals into sustainable prosperity. This is not merely policy. It is a pledge. It is an assertion of rightful sovereignty and a promise of shared prosperity. The world will feel this change. Markets will adapt. Industries will need to adjust. But that is the point. Fairness requires change. Let history remember that, at this turning point, we chose the long road of dignity over the short profit of exploitation. We chose our people. We chose our future. They said Africa was only a supplier, never a shareholder in the world's future. But when one declaration from this continent caused the markets to tremble, when even the might of Tesla felt the shock, and Elon Musk himself watched his empire lose billions in an hour, the world finally saw the truth, that the foundation of modern power rests on African soil. For decades, our resources fueled the wealth of others. Our cobalt built their cars. Our lithium charged their devices. Our gold filled their vaults. Yet our children still walk past mines that sparkle with everything except opportunity. That time has ended. This is not a story of revenge. It is a story of awakening. Africa is no longer the background of someone else's success. We are the headline of a new century. From Lagos to Bamako, from Nairobi to Ouagadougou, from Kinshasa to Accra, a new generation is speaking the same language. Dignity, unity, sovereignty, and to every African across the oceans, in the United States, in Europe, in the Caribbean. This movement is your calling too. The heartbeat of Africa does not fade with distance. Whether you are in New York or Nairobi, the blood that built empires still runs through you. So join this rise, share the voice, stand for the idea that Africa's future will be shaped by African hands. Because when our people stand as one, no empire can divide us. When our nations move together, no market can silence us. Africa will rise, not tomorrow but now. Together, we are not the world's supply chain. We are the world's next superpower.